Hello. Well, Lenny Henry is a real disappointment. For those of you out of the UK, Lenny Henry was a British comedian. He's not a comedian anymore. He used to be so funny, and the funniest thing was the way he was introduced to the British public. I mean, he'd worked for quite a while before he became a thing in the media, but I believe his first appearance, I didn't see it, but I believe his first appearance was when he did impressions, and he had his back to the audience and he was apparently leaning over a pram, cooing at a baby in the pram. And the impression he was doing was of an actor called Michael Crawford, who, in the character of a hapless, accident-prone loser called Frank Spencer, had recently, in his character, he'd had a baby. So Lenny Henry was being that character leaning over the baby's pram. And he had Michael Crawford's voice absolutely perfectly. And everybody was laughing at Michael Crawford, who is a very white actor. And then after, a few words of this cooing and Michael Crawfording, Lenny Henry stood up, turned round, and there was this black man standing there, which gave everybody a surprise because it was very new at the time. This is, 30 years ago. So anyway, you might say that Lenny Henry got his start in comedy by a sort of adopting at least a vocal whiteface. He did a lot of impressions and he was very good. As I said, I didn't see his original act, but I know that he could do a Michael Crawford perfectly because I've seen him do impressions of other actors, other well-known voices. So that's how Lenny Henry got started, and he was a very funny comedian for years. Well, obviously, not obviously. In many cases, comedians sort of run out of steam as they get older. There's some who don't, but many who do, and they go into serious acting and do well in that as well. I'm not knocking it. I'm just giving you an outline of Lenny Henry's career. So it was starting off as doing impressions and being a general stand-up. And then he was doing comedy series shows. And then it was a little more serious. And I haven't seen him much for a while. But, he's around. And this is an interview in the Mail Online. Sir Lenny Henry says he's always surprised by lack of black and Asian people in audience at Glastonbury. Now, I may have this wrong, but so I've never been to Glastonbury, but so far as I know, there aren't any guards at the gate turning away people of dusky hue. So if black and Asian people are not in the audience, it's because black and Asian people are not presenting themselves as audience. What are you going to do? Go into areas of Jamaican or Indian settlement in London or Birmingham or wherever and get the guns out and frog march them to Glastonbury to turn up to make up the numbers. Remember, there are maybe 13%, it might be less, of the British population is of an ethnic minority origin. Now, you see more in media, because media makes an effort. And of course, their music is was traditionally one of the routes out of the back streets for black people, at least. So there was more black people in that industry all along. I think, you know, in Yorkshire it was for white working class young men. It was boxing, I believe. You know, it's just one of those things. You see it as a way out, and if you're talented at it, you go for it. So Lenny Henry is in an environment where there are more, at least black people, I'm talking about of African origin some way back. We all are supposed to be, but you know what I mean. So he's in an environment where there is probably a higher presence of black entertainers than you'd find among black people in Britain. You're going to get a slightly skewed vision of what Britain is, I suppose. So let me go through this article, and then I want to make a point about Asian people in a Glastonbury audience, okay? Sir Lenny Henry has said he's always surprised and interested by the lack of black people at British festivals, including Glastonbury. You know, as if, as I said, there were guards at the gate. The actor and comedian made the comments in an interview with the BBC's Clive Meary for Radio Times ahead. I don't know whether that's the right pronunciation of his name, by the way. Sorry if I'm wrong. The release of a two-part documentary about Caribbean culture in Britain later this month. Discussing diversity and places where different groups do not mix, Sir Lenny, who was born... Now, Sir Lenny, I have to point out, he got a knighthood generally for... I don't know specifically what it was for, but it would have been for some sort of meritorious work, community work. Who was born in Dudley in 1958, a year after his Jamaican parents moved to the UK, said, "It's interesting to watch Glastonbury and look at the audience and not see any black people there. I'm always surprised by the lack of black and brown faces at festivals. I think, wow, that's still very much a dominant culture thing." Well, it's a dominant culture. You see, this is one of the reasons that people like Lenny Henry are actually holding back social integration. He thinks he's making a critique of the society, but what he's doing is driving a wedge. The dominant culture, yes, of course it's a dominant culture. And there's something else. If the dominant culture is white and you happen to be black, this will slightly set you apart in some way. It may not be a huge way. It may not stop you from voting, getting an education, earning a living, or accessing health services, but it will put you slightly to one side, for sure. There are two advantages to this. And one of them is that you're outside the British class system if you're in that sort of a situation. So you can sort of slide up and down sideways of the hierarchy. That's one thing. And the other thing is that being slightly to one side gives you a slightly different view on the society, which can actually be beneficial, like binocular vision. You know, two eyes give you a better and more detailed and in-depth view of something than just one eye. It's frequently been said that some of the best novelists of the 19th century were women, and that's because women at that time were slightly to the side of society, which was driven by men, and women gave another view, and this was an important view. And an unconventional view. I mean, when you think of, for instance, Charlotte Bronte, the daughter of a vicar and a very respectable lady, had her hero, Jane Eyre, willingly offer to live with a man without benefit of marriage. That was an astonishing thing for a lady in the, I don't remember when she wrote that book, but it must have been around either 10 years on either side of the 1850s. You don't think of those sorts of things happening, and this came out of a vicar's daughter in an isolated village in the Yorkshire moors somewhere, and hardly the throbbing metropolis. Anyway, just in case you don't know Jane Eyre, the point is that she falls in love with a man who's married to a madwoman. And there's no marriage there. The madwoman is kept in an attic, but he's, of course, not free to marry. And then, so she runs away. And then when she gets her own income, so she's an independent woman, she goes back to him with the intention of saying, all right, now I'm an independent woman, I'll live with you. I mean, can you imagine the boldness of that plot idea? It's something that slips past a lot of people, but so there is an advantage to being on one side. It's something you can celebrate while not trying to overturn the dominant culture. The dominant culture is the dominant culture. It's the reason your parents, Sir Lenny, came to Britain in the first place, because they thought that they would have more opportunity for themselves and their children. And indeed, just look at you, an extremely wealthy man with the ear of the top levels of society. And now you're saying, well, there aren't enough brown faces. Oh, this is a very dominant culture thing. I think that's hideously ungrateful, actually. Okay. And I might say he started his career on a show called the Black and White Minstrel Show. And that was, look, it was conceived in innocence. And it came out of a tradition in Britain, by the way, of blackface, which was not the same as the American blackface. All the men were blacked up and sang sort of generally traditional Southern American songs, or in the style of, and all the women wore sort of sparkly swimsuits and high heels, and they were all white women, I mean, not blacked up. And it was innocent. After a while, because of the, and at this point, pollution from America, where blackface was actually insulting, it stopped. Well, it had to, because we realised that there's a different society now, a different view of things. So I'm not mourning the end of it. I'm just saying it didn't come out of anything bad. But Lenny Henry got his start as a comedian on the Black and White Minstrel Show, and he didn't object to that. He says now that he feels bad. He felt bad about it then, but he didn't feel bad about it, too bad about it at the time, not to earn a living, and a very good living at it. And as I say, the singers and dancers of the Cliff Mitchell singers, they became known as later on. They were very professional and very slick, and it wasn't at the time. For its time, it wasn't bad. It wasn't insulting, actually. It's great to have David Olusoga on television talking about Black British history that goes back to Hadrian's Wall. Well, okay, you can focus in on that sort of thing. There would have been black Roman soldiers. I don't actually call that Black British history, though. They are Roman soldiers. They would have spoken Latin, and they would have acted in accordance with the way that all Roman soldiers acted. There would have been no serious black culture in that thing. They would have just been part of the Roman army, and mostly they left, although not always. There's somebody they found, I think it was near Bristol, because Bristol and Bath were two big Roman centres, and Bath, where Jane Austen set some of her action in her novels, it had hot springs, so the Romans went there for the same reason the 18th century, 19th century people went there. And they found a tomb there and discovered that the man who had been buried in it was probably from Syria or that area. Well, of course there would have been traders there. There was, sorry, that was a cough. Cornwall, which is in striking distance of Bath. Cornwall was a place where they mined tin, and tin was very important in the Roman economy. It was an ingredient of bronze, which was still being used in all sorts of things. So it doesn't surprise me that there would have been traders there. There would have been metal traders, and the metal traders would have wanted certain foods and spices that they were used to in Rome or even the eastern provinces. So, of course, there would have been people there from the Levant, and some did stay, probably, set down families and set up house there. But I wouldn't call this black culture or Middle Eastern culture. They were there, they absorbed themselves mostly into the Roman society. It's great to have David Olusoga talking about Black British history. It goes back to Hadrian's Wall. Somewhere the gatekeepers have changed, because now we're allowed to have you on Mastermind. But how long did that take? He said. Well, I don't know about allowed. It's just a sort of gradual percolation. That's the word. And then he says this: we still want more representation because we deserve it. We're British citizens. We're colonials. Well, I don't know what he's saying here. Is he saying we're British citizens, or is he saying we're colonials? There are two slightly different things. We still want more representation because we deserve it. We are British citizens. We are colonials. Make up your mind, Lenny. Sir Lenny. Are we, that is you, are you talking about black people, Jamaicans, British citizens or colonials? If you're born here, you're a British citizen. You're not a colonial. And the second thing is, don't get into this habit of thinking you deserve things. Yeah, if you pay your taxes, then you can get the services. You should be able to get the services to which you're entitled and the freedoms to which you're entitled. But don't go around saying, well, I deserve this. I deserve to be in the Glyndebourne Festival. Just bloody go there. That's it. Stop feeling aggrieved about it. And if there aren't many people there of your particular skin colour, well, that's just because they don't want to be there. Now, that might be because they don't feel like they're part of the dominant culture. And whose fault is that? Well, I'll tell you whose fault. It's the teachers, the schools, the ones who say to these kids, well, you have your black culture, so you shouldn't be interested in ours. Or the jealous, spiteful ones who say if you take part in the white culture, then you're, there are some insulting words for people who are, in America, it's a biscuit, and here it's a sort of nut that's sort of a darker colour on the outside than on the inside. And you're going to get people from your own community doing that. And that's nobody's fault but yours and your community. And you fight back against that. Stop blaming the dominant culture. Okay, and then he said something else that really bothered me. Where is it? Yeah. Okay, right. Speaking at a media event, he said, when I look over into the newsroom and all the people there make the news, there are very few that look like me. Well, there are very few black people in the country, actually. And every film set you walk on, there's Dave, Pete, Charlie, Terry. There are not many Rahims. That needs to change too. I'll tell you why there aren't that many Rahims. Because all the Rahims are out there outside Sheffield Cinema mobbing the cinema owner because of a Muslim film that you disagree with. That's why there aren't that many Rahims. I'm not saying that all the Rahims are like that. I'm saying that with that sort of a mindless mob gripping the Muslim community in this country, there are going to be far fewer Rahims out in the world than there should be, given their numbers. I just want to finish by telling you a little story that happened to me. I was this was an adult young man who was a student of mine, and he was a Muslim. And I was talking about Hermes, the parcel company. But then I happened to mention that Hermes, of course, is the name of a Greek god. Now, this particular young man did not understand what I was talking about, and he was puzzled by this. A Greek god. So I said, yeah. He used to take the messages from the gods. So he had these wings on his heels and he could fly through the air. And so this fellow said, so he's an angel. I said, no, an angel is a different sort of thing. This is a Greek god. It's part of the Greek pantheon. So he said, he's an angel. He did not have the concept of the Greek gods. Now, he'd been brought up in Britain. Why didn't he have this concept? Because he hadn't been taught it at school. And he hadn't been taught it either because the teachers didn't know themselves, that's old dead white men stuff or whatever, or his class had deliberately missed that one out because the teacher was worried about Muslim parents being annoyed that their kids were being taught about Greek gods. And I think that's actually far more likely, cultural sensitivity in the classroom and all the rest of it. And that's where the problem, that chap is not likely to go to Glastonbury. And there are far too many of him around to, no, not far too many. There are so many of him around that the pool of not assimilated, assimilation isn't the word. Assimilation, integration is the word. There are not enough of that community who are integrated into the dominant culture. And why shouldn't it be the dominant culture? It was the culture that was here. So there aren't enough, and that's why there aren't enough Rahims, because you can't be in a media newsroom and not know the nature of Greek gods. I mean, it's part of the culture, obviously. I'm not saying it as a specific. Okay, so a BBC spokesman said, weasel words, blah-de, 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 blah, 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 blah. No, what the BBC spokesman said, the BBC is working hard to ensure our staff reflect the full diversity of the UK on and off screen so we can better serve our audiences. We know there is more to do and have clear targets to increase representation across the organisation. Well, I mean, that's the formula, isn't it? Okay, well, that's it. That's my opinion of a very disappointing Sir Lenny Henry. When you start getting resentful of the culture that offered your family so many and such big opportunities, there's something wrong with you, not with the dominant society. And I'm not talking about, sort of licking your way or all the way to the BBC offices, by the way. Okay. Right, I'm Granniopteryx. I am to be found on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds. I let you know when I've uploaded a video on Twitter, Gab and Parler, and my handle there is @Granniopteryx. Please like this video and share it. And what else? Yes, contribute to the channel if you can. As I've said before, a couple of, 3 or 4 previous videos, for obvious reasons I didn't monetize them, and so I'm not earning anything from this month. Not much anyway. My earnings have gone right down. Not that they were great to begin with, but they did almost cover shoeing my horses. Okay, so right, that's it. Yeah. And subscribe. Yeah, click the subscribe button just to make sure you are subscribed. Okay, till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Granniopteryx design or Granbo. with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.granniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share, share, share.